All right, 1 second here. Oops. All right, welcome everyone to this Q&A. Again, I want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. Been a little more than a week. We haven't done this Q&A due to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Had a little bit of a break. So again, want to welcome everyone. To this Q&A. And a few questions came in. I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but I don't even think we're going to finish the first one. But question came in that someone asked me earlier, and it's kind of a loaded question. The way it came in, obviously they had an agenda, but which is with most, I would say with most questions, I would say most questions in general, and that is, as we would say most questions you have to see, you have to see where the question's coming from. And this question was, does truth matter? All right, that's why we said it's kind of a loaded question. And the obvious answer is, of course, truth matters. Right, kind of hard to understand the question, right? But essentially, what's behind the question, right? Let's analyze here. Now, we do understand there are people. I wouldn't say they're the majority by any stretch, but there are people out there. There are people out there that are searching for truth. Now, the Talmud says clear. Anyone who wants to go in the right direction, God is going to help them. Anyone who does not want to go in the right direction, God will not stop them. Right? It's catch 22. You want to help yourself? Good. You don't want to help yourself? Then what's going to happen? Who says God has to help you? Right? If you want to go on the wrong path, that's going to be someone's choice. Now, that really would get into my second question that someone asked. Maybe we'll hit both of them at the same time. And that is, how do I know I'm going in the way of my good inclination or my bad inclination? Another pretty loaded question. So we'll try and hit both at the same time, right? I.e., does truth matter? And if truth does matter, how do I know it's really true? Right? How do I know I'm really going in the right direction? How do I know I'm not being fooled? Right? That's really, that's really the question, which we can actually combine. As someone here asks, what's the difference between idolatry and heresy? Idolatry, right? We'll see. I'm going to fit all these together, I hope. There is a method to the madness sometimes, right? Idolatry is pretty clear. Torah says, you're not allowed to bow down to idols. You're not allowed to have graven images. You're not allowed to have images, let's say, from the sky. I.e., if you made a picture of the sun, in more than one dimension, right? That would be forbidden unless, you put like a smiley face or something like that, right? Anything in heaven, shouldn't take pictures of, shouldn't have pictures of, again, the sun, the moon, planets or whatever. Again, if it's more than three, more than one dimension, more like I say, a picture or something like that. So heresy, right? Heresy is something also pretty specific. And the question in part 2 of that is, can you be heretical without being idolatrous? So if they are specific things, right? In other words, idolatry is I can't bow down to something, give it power that it doesn't have. Or let's say I cannot, let's say you don't bow down to it, but you give it power to which it doesn't have. That can also be idolatry. Now, idolatry can be not necessarily worshiping. It could be giving, it could be giving something that has no power. And you're saying, this is my God, or you give it power that takes God out of the world. Let's say money. People give a lot of credibility. You have a lot of money, right? Money brings power, fame, right? Brings a lot of different things. Mostly, I would say things that aren't necessarily so good. Can make a person haughty, can make them conceited, different things. But heresy, right? Being a, what's the word? Being a kofar, someone who denies God. It's also a heretic. Now, we also define a heretic in Talmudic literature. We call someone a heretic who's a min, mem yud nun. Now, what does mem yud nun mean? Mem yud nun means it's a notricon, an acronym for Meyeshu Anoitzu, from JC the Nazareth, right? So, why did the rabbis use the word min? Obviously, because of the censors, right? Talmud was censored. Remember a number of years ago, a small pamphlet came out with different passages in the Talmud that were censored. Right now, in most new printings of Talmud, all the uncensored Gemaras, all the uncensored portions are put back in. Right? We're not necessarily worried about censors anymore. So they are put in. But the Rambam, in the Laws of Repentance, lists the number of people who are considered what we call a kofar. A kofar means someone who denies God. Now, that can mean a person believes everything the Torah is true except one verse. Or they don't believe in the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu or the prophets, or maybe one thing that the prophet said. There are different levels, right? There are different levels of what we'll call kfirah, how they define it as heresy, right? Or denying God, right? That's what it is. There are different levels. There are many, many different levels, right? Of what the Rambam says, that, who's considered someone denies God. Now, we also say a Jew, desecrates Shabbos in public, right? He also denies God, right? He also is a heretic, right? Not according to strict definition, right? But he would also be considered a heretic unless he repents, right? He absolutely has to repent. But if not, then if you have wine that is not pasteurized, so we'll call it spiritual cooties, a non-Jew touches it if it's open. Let's make clear, if the bottle is open, spiritual cooties we'll call it, he can't touch it. If he touches it, meaning he touches it, pours it, even for himself, then you have to throw out the whole bottle. Right? 100% you have to throw out the whole bottle. Again, it's the rabbinic decree. It's a rabbinic decree. Now, the issue over here is, right? The issue over here is that idolatry, there are different things a person can do to worship an idol. They can bow down to it. They can bring incense to it. They can sacrifice to it. And there are other things that, let's say you have different parts of this idolatrous practice. A holy wafer will use, right? That a person not allowed to eat. Jews not allowed to eat, not allowed to get benefit from it. Anything used for idolatry. Right now, you could tell me maybe idolatry and denying God are two separate things. Maybe. Right? Worshiping an idol and doing different things like that, I can hear is very specific. On the other hand, you're giving something a power it doesn't have. Right? The star, the sun, the moon, let's say better, wind, fire, these things have power. But they don't have, as the Ramchal says, and a lot of this Kabbalah we mentioned many times, these things do not have independent power. They can't have independent power. Right? No such thing. Right? Just like in no such thing as fallen angels. What's the proof? What's the question people always ask? They're going to ask in this week's parsha that we're just starting the book of Genesis, right? The end of the book, at the end of the first parsha of Bereshis. What does everyone ask? The question. They ask the question about the Nephilim. Right, we're going to throw this in there also. Throw a lot of things there in one shot. Talk about the Nephilim. Chapter 6, verse 4. It says in the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and afterward the sons of the rulers would consort with the daughters of men who would bear to them. They were the mighty who from old were men of devastation. Right? So, simple explanation is they were big men. They were powerful. Right? They were giants. As it says clearly, Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, right? Which speaks about the Meraglim. Speaks about the sin of the spies. When they go to the land, when they spy out the land of Israel. They're called giants. But what does the word Nephilim really mean? Right? They translate it as giants here. But I was actually looking around on Simchas Torah that I saw one commentary actually say they're angels. That they were actually angels. Everyone else, there are many, many commentaries here who learned very straight, very simple. They were giants. That's how we translate it. They were giants. But what does the word Nephilim literally mean? It means to fall. Right? That's what it means. Nun Pei Lamed means to fall. So I say fall over here because there is an opinion that they were angels. That they were angels over here. Now, someone's going to say, okay, if they were angels in the body of a man, that can happen. See many times in the Torah that angels came disguised as men. We see there were three angels that came to visit Abraham. Right? One, to tell Abraham that he's going to have a child. One, to heal him. And one, to overthrow Sodom. Right? So you see there were three angels disguised as men, or basically disguised as Arabs, really. And the question, one thing we learn out is that when an angel comes to give over a message or whatever he's supposed to do, he only does one thing. In other words, God tells him, this is what I want you to do, now go do it. Can't rebel. No such thing. There is no rebellion over here. He's got to do what God says. Right? For the Christians, it's a lot harder because they believe, where does evil come from? From Mr. S. Right? From the evil inclination, which we're going to see in this week's Parsha, chapter 3, by the snake, reincarnated the evil inclination, the angel of death, as well, which we're not really going to get into. The point is that he can't do whatever he wants. He can entice, he can try and make people sin, different things, but doesn't have free will, right? He has to do what God tells him. What's the proof for that? Very simple. Go to the beginning of the book of Job. Beginning of the book of Job, God says, hey, what do you think? What do you think of my servant Job over here? Comes on the adversary, i.e. the evil inclination, angel of death, whatever you want to call him. What does the adversary say? Oh, really? I bet if you make him suffer, he's going to blaspheme. He's going to say things against you. God says, no, he won't. He says, let me try. Let me work on him. Right? What does God say? Fine. God says, I'll let you do it. One condition. What's the condition? You're not allowed to kill him. That's the condition. So what does that show me? Can't do whatever he wants. 100% he can't do what he wants. Right? He's a messenger. Right? Just like a person's created. Right? The baby forms. And inside, let's make it easy. A healthy child. The child grows up. Now, can organs inside the body, can the organs inside the body, can they rebel? Can't rebel. Right? They can get sick. Other things can happen. But they themselves cannot do whatever they want to do. Right? They're programmed. Every single person, however their body works, most of it works the same. Instead of forget about sickness, you don't see, the Chosel Vavos says, says in duties of heart and the gate of self-accounting, he says clear, you don't see anywhere in the body that the body rebels. That any organ says, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to go here. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to secrete these acids and whatever. You don't see it. Now, doesn't mean the body can't be diseased, etc. That's, that the organ's not in control of over here. That's just the result of other things. But even without going into that, we mentioned by a Jew, right? If they deny God, they don't keep Shabbos in public. They desecrate Shabbos in public. It doesn't matter what. Doesn't matter how much they don't know. Doesn't matter if they grew up as a potato farmer in Idaho. No offense, anyone who's a potato farmer grew up in Idaho. If they don't know anything, but they desecrate Shabbos in public, right? What do we do when we make Kiddush Friday night? We stand and we say Genesis chapter 2. We say the very beginning of Genesis chapter 2, which says that God finished creating the heaven and the earth. So now, why do we stand? We stand because we're giving testimony. We're giving testimony God created the heaven and the earth. We're giving testimony in general. You stand. But someone, even if they make Kiddush, let's say you got some secular Jews, they make Kiddush. I'm going to call them secular because they don't do much anything else. Right? So let's say they make Kiddush. They keep Shabbos, quote unquote, a little bit, whatever it is, according to what they think or what they know. Right? Regardless of that, they'll get credit. They'll get credit for making Kiddush. No question. May even get reward for making Kiddush. But what if they desecrate Shabbos in public? If they desecrate Shabbos in public, what do? They deny the fact that God exists. They deny. It doesn't matter why. It's irrelevant why. They're going to get killed in this world, and they're going to lose their portion in the world to come. So there are different levels, as we mentioned, of heresy that are more severe. Right? Again, someone can believe everything that the Torah is true and all the prophets except one verse. Some could say, I don't believe in the prophets. Some say, I believe in some of the prophets. There's different levels, right? That is what we call kfirah. Kfirah will define as heresy. Now, if a person doesn't believe that, if he, let's say better, if he believes that the entire Torah is true except for a couple verses, does that mean he's an idol worshiper? Doesn't mean that. Right? We mentioned by a secular Jew, they're liable for the death penalty because they deny God. They deny the fact that God created the world. Right? Does that make him an idol worshiper? In this case, yes. There are certain things that a person can be considered that they worship idols even if they don't bow down to it. Right? A person, there are a few things, just while I'm on this topic, because I want to get back to the other part, and that is that a person could think certain things, right? A few things. And even if they think of, most things that a person thinks, even if we don't act on them, might be not good to think about, but even if we don't act on them, we're given a free pass. We're pretty much given a free pass. Why are we given a free pass? Because we say, Devarim shebalev eino devarim. Words in my heart do not mean anything except by two things. One is idolatry. One is immorality. If a person thinks to himself and says, X is my God. He says, this is my God, whatever it is. He doesn't worship it. He doesn't bow down to it. He doesn't sacrifice to it. Does not give incense to it. But he says, this is my God. In his mind. He doesn't say it out loud. He says it in his mind. So there are many commentaries that say that's forbidden. That means you take on idolatry. That's a total prohibition for a Jew. No question. So the other thing is by immorality. A person thinks certain thoughts, even if they don't act on them. Also bad. Also can be held against you. Just about everything else in Torah, we don't say that. Normally we say words in my heart don't mean anything. Now, it might not be good to think certain things, I would agree. Right? That may very well be true. But at the same time, doesn't mean that, so it, that has any ramifications. Doesn't mean it has no connotation over here. or no repercussion. Most cases, whatever a person thinks doesn't matter. Right? 100% it's not going to matter because he didn't do anything. Right? Just like by certain prayers, I have to enunciate them even softly to myself. But if I think it in my mind, I don't get credit. Thinking in your mind doesn't help. So in this case, by idolatry, right? A person thinks, this is my God, he's toast. Right? Unless he repents. Right? He's going to be toast in my language. So if that's the case, we know, or as we're finding out now, there are different levels. There are different levels of heresy that do not come under the category of idolatry. Right? Idolatry is something, I would say, very specific. Could be there's overlap. It could be someone who does, let's say, deny God or denies the Torah, denies the prophets at any level. Could be. He's going to be liable for idolatry. It depends. Right? We're not going to say across the board. Does it? Usually does. That's not the case. It doesn't necessarily make him an idol worship. Certain things might. Certain things a person may do, a Jew may do, let's say better. Certain things a Jew may do in the case of desecration shabbos in public got the status of a non-Jew. There are certain things a person can lose their status as a Jew. Good example, 13 principles of faith. If you look at the 13 principles of faith of the Rambam, of Maimonides, so all of them are obligated for a Jew to believe. A non-Jew most likely has to believe in the first one. God is absolute. Doesn't have to believe God runs the world, that there's divine providence, but he has to believe there is a God. Right? There is a God, he does exist. He has to believe that. And that he's absolute and he doesn't change. All the other ones, that he's unique, the thoughts of man, resurrection, the Messiah, different things. Who says he has to believe in that? Who says a Jew has to believe in that? Sorry, a non-Jew. Right? A Jew absolutely has to believe in it. If a non-Jew doesn't believe in it, we're not going to throw the book at him. It's not one of the Noahide laws. I think it's a good thing. I would say it's a moral imperative, but it doesn't mean they have to believe in it. So based on that, I would say there's a little bit of overlap. I wouldn't say there's so much, but there is a little bit of overlap between someone who's idolatrous and someone who's a heretic. Some things will overlap. I would say, though, there are strict definitions. There are a number of strict definitions where they won't overlap. I'm not going to go in, I'm not going to go through it. I'm just pointing out that it's not always the same. Right? Probably a lot of times it's not. The problem is we throw around a lot of terms. We'll say this is desecration of God's name, but a desecration of God's name has a specific definition. Right? And even if it has to be done in front of 10 Jews. If you have 100 non-Jews and a person does something wrong, and quote unquote, it's a bad thing to do, technically speaking, it's not a desecration of God's name. Why not? Because it's a specific definition. But we throw around terms in general, and we'll say, oh, that's a terrible thing. Makes Jews look bad. You're right. It might have all the definition of being a desecration of God's name, except the main definition. That has to be done in front of 10 Jews. If it's not done in front of 10 Jews, if it's done in front of 8, done in front of 5, done in front of 1,000 non-Jews, doesn't matter. Right? It's not a good thing. Let's say, for argument's sake, it's not a good thing that this Jew did. Does not mean strictly according to the definition it's a desecration of God's name. Right? You got to be careful. So we got to be careful throwing around, throwing around terms. Even though I would agree that, we can say loosely, let's say this thing is a desecration of God's name or whatever. But again, it's a bad thing to do. We'd all agree, whatever it is. It's a bad thing to do, makes Jews look bad. So we'll say that's desecration of God's name. But okay, there has to be a definition, right? There's a definition, specific definition. So even though we'd say it's desecration of God's name, it's a terrible thing. But even it's a terrible thing, if you didn't do it in front of 10 Jews, not a desecration of God's name, right? Technically speaking. So based on that, so we spoke about the Nephilim, how these angels are not fallen, right? Even though there are commentaries that hold that they were angels. So what was the point? according to that. They weren't giants, they were angels. Disguised as giants. What would be the point? And you say, oh, they have free will. So now there's an interesting question. That when an angel goes in a body to do they have a specific thing they have to do. Whatever the message is they have to give over, they have to do. They get disguised, as, in a human body. They get put in a human body. Very good. Now, the question is, if the angel's in that body, can the angel do whatever it wants? Does that angel have, is that angel subservient to the body? Or do we say the angel's independent? And if the angel's independent, it doesn't matter the body it's in. The angel's going to do what it needs to do. Right? And the body's going to be more like a robot. But we see that's not necessarily the case. Where do we see it? We see in the case of the Nephilim. Now, the Nephilim, you're going to tell me they're an angel in the body of a person. You're right. But what does the Torah tell me? They strayed after their hearts. They went after the women of that time. And you figure out the rest. What happened? We'll keep this clean. Right? So if that's the case, you say, oh, look, they fell. First of all, we don't believe in fallen angels. Right? We absolutely don't believe in that. So what happened? So God made a point. Because the angel said, if we were in, you gave the Torah to man, if you would have given it to us, right? We wouldn't have sinned over here. We had it easier. So God says, really? You really think you have it so much easier? You think man is so bad? God says, I'd be willing to bet a lot of money, right? And this would be a sucker bet, right? But he said, he said, I'll give you the opportunity. You guys, you spiritual beings, you think it's so easy to be in a human body? Okay, I'll give you a test. I'll put you in a human body. Let's see what you do. Let's see what you do. Again, if the angel is really powerful, that spiritual soul is powerful, the body shouldn't sin. The soul should control it. But what happened? We see it's not true. And we know that not to be true. Why? Because if you read the book, Derech Hashem, you go through the book, The Way of God by the Ramchal. What does the Ramchal tell you? The Ramchal tells you that the soul is so powerful, so unbelievably powerful, it would go in the body in general and it would shine the way it should. The body should explode. The body can't hold that amount of Kiddush. Cannot hold that amount of holiness. So what happens? So the soul goes in the body and the soul gets trapped. It gets trapped by the physical. It can never shine the way it should unless it's in the spiritual world. In the physical world, okay, you have righteous people. And if you see them, they have a certain glow, they have a certain aura, different things, okay? But they're not in their pure form. Their pure form is being the soul and being in that spiritual world. That we'll never see until we're in that world. That we can't understand. But the Ramchal tells you in Derech Hashem, if Adam, the first man, would have done what he was supposed to do this week's parsha, if he would have sanctified himself, not listened, not listen to his evil inclination or the evil inclination, whatever that means, he ends up eating from the tree. It all changed, right? The whole world, as we know it, changed because it brought death to the world. But that being the case, had he done what he was supposed to do, he would have sanctified his body so much, he would have gone straight into paradise, straight in the Garden of Eden. The world comes to a close. He fulfilled his purpose, and that's it. Well, obviously that's not what happened, because that's what would happen. You wouldn't be listening to me, right? And part of the atonement process for the first man is what? Is that when a person dies, he sees him, he understands he's the first man, and he says, because of you, I have to go through this process of death, because death is not a Jewish concept. So that's part of the atonement process but I digress, right? I don't get too far off topic here. So based on that, we see that the evil inclination, in general, Mr. S, whatever you want to call him, can't do whatever he wants. And there's no such thing as fallen angels, right? No such thing. But back to the original question, right? And this I want to hit, right? And that is, it's a really two-part thing, but it's part of the same. And that is, does truth matter? And how do I know I'm going in the way of my good inclination or I'm going in the way of my bad inclination? So the first aspect of this question is does truth matter? And what's the obvious answer? Of course, truth matters. Why wouldn't truth matter? There are a lot of people. The problem is a lot of people, and people are sick of hearing this. Oh, you think you have the truth. You think you're right. But what about the Christians? What about the Muslims? What about the Hindus? What about 79,998 or 97 other religions? They all think they're right. Not everybody can be right. Right? Because they, well, he's right, and they may also be right. Can't be. Either there's absolute truth, and there's no flaws, or not. If the litmus test would be if we could prove something to be not true, right? Something to be false, something to be a mistake in whatever book they claim is divine, then it can't be true. Christianity, many flaws. Islam, many flaws. By the Hindus, many flaws. By the other religions, many, many flaws. Now, if, God forbid, someone find a flaw in the Torah, also, then you throw out the Torah also. All you need is one flaw. If God would say Moshe Rabbeinu, lived in Shechem, we find out, or Nablus as they call it, right? And you found out really lived in Tzfat, or he lived in Mesopotamia, or he lived in Midian, wherever he lived. If there's a contradiction, it can't be true. If you see the Torah says that you can eat any fish that has scales and fins, what does that mean? Any fish you find that has scales will have fins, and vice versa. You'll never find a species that has scales and not fins, or fins and not scales. Once you would find that species, that's it, Torah can't be true. Can't be true. You find a flaw. So, if there are flaws in other books, we know it can't be true. So now, based on that, right, we'll get to the nitty-gritty. Why do we need truth? Why is truth important? And the second question will be, and even if it is important, and even if, let's say, a person did find the truth, does that mean they're going to act on what they found? Are they going to be intellectually honest to fulfill whatever they found out? Right? That's the second part of the question. Now, I would say today, in this generation, and even when I grew up, whenever I grew up, right, way back when, and even in my parents' generation, go back 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, truth, I wouldn't say is the most important thing in the world. Now, why would I say that? Because there are a lot of things in the world that people follow that are false, that essentially have no meaning, right? Sports, entertainment, no offense, art, music, they might be enjoyable, but, they may please our senses to a certain extent. But the reality is, who cares? Who really cares? You got the Enlightenment, you got the Renaissance, you got all these famous painters and artists, musicians, all these different things. No offense, anyone who likes, good music, bad music or whatever, likes art, enjoy, beautiful art. Is that the meaning of life? Right? That's really what this question is, gets to. What is the real meaning of life? So the Ramchal says in his introduction, the path of the just, mentions it in Derech Hashem also. God wants to be what we call a meiti. He wants to give of his goodness to this world. How does he give of his goodness? He wrote a book, manufactured it himself. He wants us to keep what it says. He wants Jews to keep what it says. He wants non-Jews, even if they don't convert, to keep whatever it says. Now, forget going to all the proofs. We know there's a God. He does exist. He wrote the Torah. There are no flaws. We're not even going to go that far. The question's going to be, though, okay, if that's my purpose is to get close to God. Now, there are a lot of obstacles in the way. Right? The Ramchal in Derech Hashem says clear. Not only are there a lot of obstacles, they stop us. They hinder us from reaching our potential. They make it a lot more difficult. But God says, of course, no pain, no gain. You cannot reach a portion in the world to come, whatever that means in the spiritual world, if you don't work in this world. You have to work hard. You have to fight for what you want. If you're not, you're not going to do that. Just go according to your desires. Okay. right? If you don't prepare Erev Shabbos, the Talmud says, you don't eat on Shabbos, meaning you don't prepare in this world, you don't work hard to serve God, and that's it, right? Why should you have a portion of the world to come? The Rambam takes it a step further. He says if you don't serve God, you're serving idols. The first of the 13 principles. It's pretty extreme, right? What do you mean? How can it be idolatry? Because you're giving something else power. You're giving something else power that it doesn't have. That's idolatry, right? Which we mentioned before. But the idea over here is I have to give meaning to something. Something has to get me out of bed in the morning, right? In general. So someone's going to say, well, I have to get out of bed because I have to put food on the table. How am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to put food on the table? I got to work, right? Most people are not going to have a silver spoon in their mouth. They're going to have to work. They may have to work very hard. They may work very hard, long hours, not make so much money, make more, make less, whatever. Not the topic for now. But a person, that's what they're going to do. You have to do good in school, do good in high school, go to a good college, go to a good university, get a degree. And they'll brainwash you and tell you that. And then you should make a nice living, maybe get married, have a couple kids, no guarantee for that, whether you get married or not, and that's it. Make a nice living, maybe see a little bit of the world, you retire at 65, and then, try and see the world when you die. And that's pretty lonely way of looking at the world, or pretty skewed way of looking at the world. And that's essentially the way I looked at the world, because I think that's true. I think, people may not admit exactly that order in different things, okay? But I definitely think it's a very skewed way of looking at the world. I don't think it's not true, right? That's why we do certain things, because, at the end of the day, we want to be, do something productive in society. How does society decide what's productive or what's not? By what you make. Now, a person can invent, like someone did in the 70s, a pet rock. Invented a pet rock. I don't know what that did for society. Person made a mint. That means the person, has a huge purpose in life. Everybody, Jew or non-Jew, needs some reason to get themselves out of bed. They need something. Some people say, well, I find meaning in family. What if you don't have a family? I find meaning in my pets. I find meaning, let's say in my children. I find meaning in my hobbies. I do a job because I need money, right? But that's not who I am. That's not, even though you meet someone for the first time, that's the question they're going to ask you. What do you do? But that's not what defines us. What defines us is, our actions, etc. But the point, let's not get lost in the point here. The point is that we need something, and psychologists will tell you this, right? You don't need me to tell you this. You can look this up. People need some meaning in life. If they feel they have no meaning in life, or even worse, if they have failed life, let's say better, life has failed them. If life has failed them, let's say, and they decide, I have no purpose in life anymore. There's nothing for me to be in this world anymore, right? If that is the case, right? If that is the case, then they'll end it. Then they will not, keep going on in life. And unfortunately, because of COVID, the, numbers were spiked, of people committing suicide, losing their livelihood, other things. But many people are very depressed today. A lot of people on Prozac, calms them down, this and that. Life throws all kinds of different curveballs, etc. But somebody needs meaning. You need meaning over here. No question. And if a person doesn't have meaning, they'll go through life numbed. Either they'll get addicted to drugs, get addicted to alcohol, other things just to numb the pain. Right? Again. Or they'll take certain things just to keep them on an even keel. Now, in some ways, maybe that's not so bad, right? Maybe I would say, it's not so bad as, it allows them to handle things better. Maybe that's what Prozac does. But what I'm talking about is depression. I'm not talking about things, it could be caused by trauma, maybe, right? It could be caused by other things. It could be caused by bullying, a lot of things, right? That a person can be certainly, depressed about. You could have women that want to be really skinny, and then they get, and they get depressed and get into bulimia and all that. I mean, many things that could lead, to different things. But, the point is that, we all need meaning. Now, the flip side of that, or maybe a subcategory, is, okay, who defines what meaning is? Right? Who defines what truth is or not? Now, truth has to be something that can be verified. Something that can be verified for all generations. I did a video on Tanakh Talk showing this, right, about proof for God's existence, different proofs for God's existence. And truth has to be absolute. It doesn't change. It doesn't change generation to generation, right? Something that would have been, totally forbidden in my parents' generation, 80, more than 80 years ago, today it becomes a mitzvah, right? So what do we see? What changed? What in the world changed? Values change for some reason. But who says that the values change for the better? Right? Who's going to make such a claim? People will say that's the case. People will say values change. The times have changed. We want to make things so permissible, so promiscuous, sorry, in different ways to show there are no inhibitions and all that. When I was growing up, this whole idea of, homosexuality and lesbianism and transgender and all that, it wasn't on the map by any stretch. Okay, I'm not saying there weren't people, did certain things, but it's not what it is today. It's not the power, no question, that it has today. So what's changed? Oh, we're more open-minded today. Yeah, we're so open-minded that our brains fall on the floor. Beautiful, right? We're so open-minded. But who says that's better? Who says it's a good thing? We need definitions. So over here, to say, well, does truth really matter? First of all, it does, for one very simple reason. And that is that if I don't have truth, what do I have? What's the opposite of truth? Falsehood, lies, right? That's the opposite of truth. So there's nothing in between, right? No such thing as a half lie. No such thing as being half pregnant. Either you are or you're not. I mean, there are things that, okay, maybe it's a little bit blunt. Maybe there are things that, you could have a half lie. It's not totally false necessarily, but it's not true either. Maybe it's somewhere, maybe somewhere in the middle. Problem is, you have two opposite extremes. You have one thing that you have truth. You have one thing that you have falsehood. Now, there is truth in the world, right? There is a litmus test for what is, for what is true, what's not. We understand that litmus test to be the Torah, but it has to stand the test of time. It's not just for one generation, not just for two generations, right? It's going to be forever. It's something that doesn't change. Now, if a person doesn't follow truth, then what happens? They do whatever they want to do. They may not cheat on their taxes because they're afraid of the IRS. They may not do other certain things because they don't want to get caught. Or maybe they will take a chance, right? It depends on the person. What they're willing to do, what they're willing to stand up to or not stand up to. But the bottom line will be, is that morality can change, right? Morality can be relative. Now, if morality can be relative, that means that person who thinks so, there is no absolute truth. So if there's no absolute truth, then the world seemingly goes to pot. The world will be destroyed. That's why God needed a nation, became the Jewish nation, to accept his word, to accept his will, right? To accept whatever he says. And as the Torah says, you can't add, can't subtract. You got to listen to what Moshe Rabbeinu says. That's the litmus test, right? It's the Bible. And again, we're going on the assumption that the Bible's true. That's the assumption. But if God forbid the Bible wasn't true, let's say, so how would the world look? What would truth look like? truth would look like in the hands of whatever a person thinks. They'll say, to me, that is the truth. That is the reality. Yeah, give an example. Give a recent example. Right? Someone says, I went somewhere and by chance this happened. Someone else says to them, there's no such thing as chance. Because if someone says it's by chance, what does that sound like? Ring a bell? Amalek. That's exactly what Amalek said. Things happen by chance. No such thing as supernatural. Right? The end of Parshas Kitei, Book of Deuteronomy says clear. Right? They believe in chance. They don't believe in the supernatural. So now, why do I bring this up? Because the other person didn't answer. Because the second person says there's no such thing as chance. So the other person just nods. They don't get into an argument. They don't get into a discussion. But what's that person thinking? What's that person thinking? I think otherwise. I think there are things that happen by chance. Okay. So you've researched. You've done research. My assumption would be you've done a lot of research. Studied philosophy, Jewish philosophy, secular philosophy. You read the Torah. You're learned. You're learned enough to make such a statement. What's the answer? You know what the answer is. Not even close. But they make a statement there. I don't think so. And I'm pretty clear of it. Even though I don't know anything. I'm pretty clear that that's the case. Really? So a person like that doesn't care about truth. They're not interested in truth. So there are two things here. First of all, I need it because that's what the world stands on. The world stands on integrity. But it has to be integrity that doesn't change. Right? That's forever. That's clear. Right? That's what it has to be. So if you don't have that, if you don't have anyone that's willing to go that far, what do you have? You have a bunch of fakers. And that's what you have in this world. It's all fantasy. Right? How many people really standing up for the truth? Really believe in the truth? And that's the second part of the question. Or second part of what I wanted to say. And that is that even if someone would say, well, maybe it is true. Maybe we'll agree we need truth in the world. Because that's how the world needs to work. You don't want to have people lying to each other, ripping people off. I mean, you have it all the time. Things going on. People not totally honest, misrepresenting, different things or whatever. It happens. 100% it happens. Torah says it's forbidden, okay? But if you didn't have truth at all, and no one was willing to live up to the truth, whatever that truth is, don't you think the world will look a heck of a lot worse? Of course, there's a certain bottom line. There's a certain low standard that has to be upheld. If not, the world can't survive. That's what happened. We'll see next week's parsha in Parshas Noach. Why does the world get destroyed? Stealing. What do you mean? That was the seal. Why? Why in the world would that be the seal? Wasn't there idolatry? Yes. Wasn't there murder? Yes. Wasn't there immorality? Yes. Those are the big three. Every Jew has to give up their life for any time, any place. So if that's the case, right, 100%, if that's the case, then what's the issue? Why is it? Why would it be? Why would it be that that's the case over here? Why would I be worried about that? And well, what's the simple answer? Simple answer I would say is because if people would steal one from another, and they would steal such a small amount, they wouldn't be liable. And then people could steal everything from people. What would happen? World couldn't survive. So you need laws that are going to be universal, that everyone's going to know, even non-Jews. The non-Jews are going to know. They're going to know what the truth is. And they're going to have to do what the truth tells them, what God tells them. Now, so if you don't have truth, and you don't have a litmus test for truth, then it's chaos. It looks even worse than what it is today. Right? It's tremendous chaos because there are a lot of things out there, especially in religion, that are false. And all you have to do is find one false thing in a divine quote unquote book, that's false. That's not true. So people can say, yeah, Christianity's true, Islam's true. Okay, if I find faults in the book, many faults, fine. I can find one, doesn't matter. 1, 2, 5, 10. If I find discrepancies, then the book can't be true. That's a litmus test. The book can't be true. So the truth has to be, there has to be a litmus test. Right? So now, based on that, there's another issue. The other issue is, even if I know what truth is, even if I found it, even if, like someone told me many years ago, if I looked into Judaism, this was a Jew talking, and I find it's true and I have to change my life, I'm not willing to do it. So that's the one person I found in the last 30 years that was intellectually honest. I've spoken to a lot of people, not intellectually honest at all. None. I haven't found anybody. People will say you can't prove it. It doesn't matter. Most people say it doesn't matter, right? That's the problem. So you're going to say, well, you can think what you want. I have my own truth. Okay, you want to start throwing around definitions? No. I'm going to do what I want to do, right? But see, that's the problem. Either there's truth or there's falsehood. If you tell me the Torah is not true, okay, so I would tell you straight up, I would tell you, prove it. Prove it that it's not true. Or go beyond the shadow of a doubt and prove that your religion is true. But if I find flaws in your book that are big enough discrepancies to show it's not divine, then it shows that your book is not true. Based on that, I would say that if you have falsehood on the other side, the problem is, what's someone going to say? Someone's going to say it doesn't matter. Right? That's this generation. Could be my generation also, even before. It's a generation that says, doesn't matter what's true or not true. I'm not changing my life. I'm going to do whatever I want. But that's not really the answer. That's just the compo. They're just saying, I'm going to do what I want anyway. Fine. They're not saying you can't prove it. I mentioned this many times, which I don't want to get into. But they're not saying you can't prove it. They're not saying the Torah isn't true. They'll say, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or that doesn't make sense to me. Okay. 80% of the Torah doesn't make sense. Doesn't mean it's not true. Now, so truth today, I would say, only for certain people matters. Because even if a person's really searching for truth, and God's going to help them get there, if they're really searching, okay, right, they'll get there. And everybody else who doesn't care, they're not interested in truth. And if they're not interested in truth, it doesn't matter. I got this proof, that proof. I can take 20 minutes, prove everything. I can prove you there's a God, he exists, and I can prove the Torah is true, and all other religions are false. Right? Give me 20 minutes, half an hour. Most people will not give you the time of day. Not only they won't give you the time of day, they won't listen. They won't listen. They're not interested. And I will tell people 100% I'm not open-minded. I never made the claim I'm open-minded. I believe the Torah is true. I believe everything else is false. And there's plenty of evidence to show other things are false. So if that's the case, the onus on you. Okay, you got questions. Great. We love questions. That does not deny the fact that the Torah is true or not. That's what it does. So now someone says, okay, even if you say you have the truth, this is now the second part of the question, right? Or the third part for me, right? And that would be, how do I know I'm going in the way of my good inclination, or my bad inclination? Right? That's the question. Now, I would say on that, just like in this week's parsha, and we mentioned many times, God said, let us make man in our image. Right? So who's the we? Who's the we? The we is God speaking the heavenly court. Right? Showing his humility. Speaking to the angels. It's a good thing to create man. Not a good thing to create man Does God need the angels? No. God need their input? No. Say what he wants, does what he wants. Wants a great man good, doesn't? It's his choice. But he's showing humility. Doesn't need the heavenly court. 100% doesn't need the heavenly court. So now, come on, the commentators say, you know why? You know, another reason God does that? Because it's in the royal we. The royal we over here. What's the royal we? God says, let us make man. Right? And what can a person think? A person can think there's more than one God. Because he's speaking in the royal way. He's saying, let us. Who's us? So it could be a person make a mistake. A person can become a heretic. 100% be a heretic. Because he can believe that there's more than one God. So why does God put it there? Oh, very good question. Why does God put it there? God puts it there, and he puts it there a number of times. Commentaries tell us in order for a person to make a mistake. Now, does God want you to make the mistake and think there's more than one God? No, not interested. He wants you to do the right thing. Is it a test? Yeah, it's a test. So now comes along second question here, which now we're going to answer. How do I know I'm going in the right way, the wrong way? Right? How do I know this is part of my good inclination or my bad inclination? If a person has a doubt, 100% they have to ask somebody if they're not sure. If they would say, you know, I would say the litmus test is, think about whatever you're going to do right now, whatever it is, think about if it's going to be something good for my soul or it's going to be bad for my soul. It's going to be good for my drawing close to God or bad. Now, problem is we could justify it. Person, let's say, God forbid, a Jew speaks Lashon Hara, speaks badly against someone else. If he speaks badly against someone else, and he'll say, yeah, but you have to understand, this person deserves it. Then he'll go through all the conditions. Now the Rabbi Chaim says, they speak 100% Lashon Hara according to everybody, but they justify it. They, and the psychologists will tell you, it's good to vent. It's good to get it out. Speak it out now. It could be speaking Lashon Hara to a psychologist. Okay. In order to help the person. In order to get deep down what's going on with the person. That's permissible. But in general, speaking Lashon Hara, if you don't meet certain conditions, which the Rabbi Chaim says that you may never meet all the conditions, and even if you do, you better think twice before you do it. Regardless of that, we could justify it and say, this person, it doesn't matter. The person's not going to be affected by what I say. It's not going to get back to them, whatever, but they're justified. They'll be justified a million different ways. Why it's permitted for them. But again, the question would be, if I would ask a Jew or a non-Jew or a Jew in training, doesn't matter. And I would ask them, you're at the water cooler at work, and someone's speaking about someone else, coworker, whatever, and you're sitting there going back and forth. Now ask yourself the question, is this a good thing to do or not? Now, deep down, I think most people would say it's probably not a good thing. But they'll say, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just listening. Are they going to say they're not taking it to heart? No, probably not going to say that. Right. But, who doesn't enjoy listening to a nice, juicy piece of gossip? Even if it doesn't affect you. Let's say it's somebody you don't really like, and all of a sudden a nice piece of information comes out. You're sitting there, yeah, I want to hear more. Right. Now, the other person's not necessarily affected. Let's say, even if they're not affected, you transgress more than 30 prohibitions. I'm listening, not just saying. Right? Person who said it, you kill 3 people. Person who said it, person who listened to it, person who spoke about it. Right? They get all these prohibitions. Person listening also transgresses. For listening, so you're going to say, what do you do in such a situation? Okay. Person try and change the subject, or at least not believe it 100%. But I think most people would agree it's not necessarily such a good thing to do. Now, today, some people may say, nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not doing anything. I'm not hurting anybody per se. No one's getting affected by it. But deep down, there are going to be some people who say, and I think it should be a lot of people, but it depends how weak this generation is or how bad it is in general. And they'll say there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. But you have to ask yourself, whatever I do, does this make me a better Jew in training, a better non-Jew, or a better Jew? Does it draw me closer to God or not? If the answer is a resounding no, you know the answer. Then you shouldn't do it. Problem is your evil inclination, other factors involved. Okay. The point is, that's what we have to ask ourselves. Am I doing the right thing? Is this right according to Torah or not? If I don't know, then before I do it, and hopefully my evil inclination doesn't overcome me, before it's done, ask someone. Ask someone in the know. Or find somebody in the know before doing it. If you know 100% it's okay. Now, this is also a little bit tricky. Let's say a person's got a fixed time to learn. We use this as an example. Let's say every day they learn for a couple hours, whatever that fixed time is. They learn for the same couple hours every day. And while they're learning, an opportunity to do an act of loving kindness comes up. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to do it. But they jump up, they want to do it. But what's the problem? Problem is, this is their time to learn. If it's an emergency, no one else can do it. Okay, you shut the book you're reading or whatever. You go do it. Right? But who says, well, I'm in the middle of learning. I have an obligation to do X act of loving kindness. The mission, Pirkei Avos, I'm going to get to one day, says two people learning. One person looks outside, says, wow, what a beautiful tree. What a beautiful mountain. Liable for a death penalty. Right? That's what the Mishnah says. Liable for a death penalty. Why the death penalty? Why is that so severe? They're learning Torah. They may be learning Torah at a very high level. Right? Who says you should have been looking outside, looking at God's creation? Praise God's creation another time. Who says you have to praise it now? While you're in the middle of learning, that's where the evil inclination can come in, even in a good way. Right? The Vilna Gaon, of Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago, brings down, this idea that the evil inclination can even come in the studio. Person goes to learn, goes into a synagogue to learn. Right? There's an evil inclination in the study hall also. What evil inclination? Speak about other things, not what you're learning. Maybe help someone out where, maybe they shouldn't be. There's an evil. There are times a person can be doing the right thing, and the evil inclination takes them somewhere else, even while they're learning Torah. That certainly can happen. The question here is, how do I know I'm going in the right way or wrong way? Right? If you know for sure it's in the wrong way, I would say, okay, that's clear. Right? If it's something where it's a little bit, as the English would say, it's a little bit dodgy, not so clear, then I have to ask. But there also could be situations where I could be doing the right thing. I could be going in the right path 100%, and it's really the wrong thing. I'll give one other example. Imagine, a person says, okay, I'm going to cut down on sleep, and I'm going to get up, a few hours earlier, and I'm going to learn more. So that's commendable. A person can live on, a certain amount of sleep, etc. But the evil inclination is going to encourage it. Why? To say, stay up very late, get up very early, do this, do that, do the other thing. And that's the work of the evil inclination. Why? Because the evil inclination knows your body can't handle it. And if you have any type of stress, right? I tried this cutting down many years ago, cutting down the amount of sleep, that I get. If there's any stress whatsoever, and a person doesn't have full concentration, you fall asleep at the drop of a hat. Because you're more tired. Your body's more tired. Right? You have to see what your body can handle, in general. But, the evil inclination over here can say, okay, just came out of, Sukkah's, Simchas Torah, we're all revved up, we all want to, change our lives, change the world. We get all excited, say, oh, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice myself now. I'm going to learn, an extra hour, an extra 2 hours, extra 5 hours. I'm going to get up extra early. Within a week, you're going to fall flat in your face. But you're going to say, what about all the ideals? What about everything I set up? All the good things. You're right. It's all good. The ideals are all good, but you got to do it within reason. Because if you don't do it within reason, it's all the work of the evil inclination. So you're going to say, but I had the right intention. You're right. We're not saying you didn't have the right intention, but you have to get guidance. You have to ask. someone in the know. Is this good? Should I be doing this? I've had, people ask, should I get up in the middle of the night and say tikkun chatzos? Sit on the floor and wail about the destruction of the temple. So someone much greater than me, Victor Miller, blessed memory, was asked this question, one of the Torah giants of the last generation. And he said, for us, in this generation, sit on the floor for 5 minutes before you go to sleep, think about the temple, and that's it. 5 minutes. He didn't say 5 hours. He didn't say 50 minutes. He didn't say 2 hours. He said 5 minutes. That's his generation. Now, someone said, but I really want to do it. So, okay, you want to do it. But there are going to be ramifications. The ramifications are, it's going to mess up your sleep. That's the ramification. You're going to be more tired during the day. You won't be able to work as well. You won't be able to learn as well. But the evil inclinations egging you on. Take on this, take on that, take on the other thing. So we have to be realistic. We have to be realistic what we can do. So even when a person wants to do the right thing at that level, and all these different things, it's a great thing. I'm not saying not. You have to know if you're ready to do it or not. Because if you're not ready to do it, the evil inclination will come and will absolutely slaughter you. Because the evil inclination is going to say, you know what? The evil inclination is going to say, come on, go ahead, do it. Do it some more. Do it a third time. Do it a fifth time. You got all these things. You work for 30 days. The month of Elul, you gain the Rosh Hashanah, 10 days of repentance, Yom Kippur, you're sailing in the skies, unbelievable. And what happened? Come Sukkot, you're dancing, you're singing, you're this, you're that, you have no strength left, recuperate a little bit, say, okay, now I'm going to bring it into the everyday. Now I'm going to do it day in and day out. Now I'm going to work so hard. Guess what? It's a great thing, but you have to know how to do it, within reason. Because if you don't get advice or you don't think of a solid plan to do it, you fall 100% flat in your face, right? So that's what I would say. That you have to be careful because even doing things in the right way could be work of the evil inclination, in that sense. And probably most people say, well, I never thought of it that way. There are a lot of things. I give countless examples, right? Those are just a few where a person can think they're doing the right thing. They close the book they read, they move on. And they do this act of loving kindness. Beautiful. But you should have been learning. What are you sitting there praising the mountain? What in the world are you praising the mountain for? Yeah. Take any questions here. Someone says, man, I'm accused of not being open to what Hashem may want from me. Let's call a spade a spade. There are a lot of things that people do in this world. They're looking for a quick fix. I heard a great rabbi once say before Yom Kippur, people look to do this, to have a good judgment and and other things, and they try this, they try that, they try the other thing. He goes, I got one good thing that everyone should do. You know what that's called? Repentance. It's called tshuva. That's what it's called. That's what it's called. Right? So we're not looking for a quick fix. I read a lot of books when I was younger, Cliff Notes. So, I wanted the Cliff Notes, to be righteous. The Cliff Notes to, the quick way to gain a lot of knowledge. You know where the Cliff Notes are? They don't exist. It's a day in and day out grind. That's what it is. You want a little bit, you want a little bit more. Building blocks, that's what it is. No quick fixes. No crystals, no this, no that. Forget Kabbalah, all these things. Take it step by step. Listen to one class, another class. Read. That's where it goes. Review. Got to work hard. That's where it goes. There are no quick fixes. And anyone who tells you that is selling you a bag of bones. No such thing. I remember, I remember someone in my early days learning yeshiva, someone walking around the study hall with a tractate of Talmud on his head. I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm hoping by osmosis. So I was like, sit down and learn. It's hard. No one says it's easy. Nobody says it's easy, right? But it's a grind. I'm not going to say it's not enjoyable. It's an enjoyable crime, but Talmud says makes us weaker because you got to think. You got to think into things. Not easy, right? But the more we learn, even the little by little we learn, those are building blocks. Yeah, a few other questions here. Someone asked, what's the deal with the curse of Ham? Why does Noah curse Ham? So Torah tells us very simply, curses Ham. Noah curses his younger son because he saw his nakedness, whereas Shem and Yefes covered up his nakedness. Right? So he embarrassed his father. Okay, his father was drunk, whatever. Still, Noah knew what happened. Right? Rashi and others also say that is one explanation. Another explanation is he made him into a eunuch. Right? That's what he did. So he wouldn't have more kids. So I guess that would make him pretty upset also. Right? But let's keep in mind. That curse, we understand Ham, who the offspring of Ham, are the blacks. Now I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but in general, say that the country of Africa has never done anything, never done anything for America, never for the world. Right? They've been enslaved, wasn't their fault. No, definitely wasn't their fault. Right? But if I didn't understand there was a curse, and that curse is forever. I'm not saying individuals can't come out of it. But at the same time, you see, other people made it in the world. Other nations, other individuals of nations. You see the Koreans, you see the Chinese, you see others. The curse is real. I don't have any other explanation. You want to tell me economics, famine, wars, imperialization, many different reasons. Okay. But eventually, they should be able to climb out of it, I would think. 400 or 500 years later, wars, famine. I don't care if the natural resources there. They've never been dominant in the world. Portugal had their day. England had their day. Right? The Greeks had their day. Rome had their day. Continent of Africa has never had their day at all. I don't care why. Doesn't matter. Right? You want to call it colonization, want to call it lack of education, want to call it this, want to call it that. 500 years or more. Still, nothing's ever come out of anything, just about, in the entire continent. Why? You can give me 100 different reasons. That's the reason. That's the only reason. I'm not the only one, I'm not the only one who says it. Right? Victor Miller, many, many years ago, a blessed memory. He also made the comment. Right? Others as well. Right? So you guys say, oh, that's racist. Call it racist. But explain to me, in uncertain terms, why that is, besides the curse. I don't have an explanation. Again, you can tell me all kinds of different things. Why 400 years? 350 years, whatever it is. Shouldn't there be something going on there? Shouldn't there be some, domination of world power somewhere? Zero. What purpose were Jews made God's chosen people? Because God chose them. It's matter clear. You don't like that answer? God chose them. Because he saw they're the ones going to accept it. But you know what? The nations aren't off the hook. Talmud says clear. God went to all the nations. None of the nations wanted the Torah. Right? Avodah Zarah, 2b, 3a. Go look it up. Whatever language you understand. Go look it up. God went to all the nations. All the nations. God said, you want to know what's written in it? He said, yeah. And God rejected one. They rejected one after another. Sorry, God didn't reject them. They rejected God. Right? The Edomites, they rejected it. The Western world, Muslims, they rejected it. Others, they rejected it. God came to the Jewish people and said, hey, you want the Torah? I said, sure. You want to know what's written in it? They said, nah, seven Ishmael. We don't care. We're not interested. So what purpose would Jews make God's chosen people? He chose them. Go ask God. He made us a light into nations because we're keeping his commandments. That's what we're supposed to do. Oh, so now you're going to claim we're not doing our job. So what? We're trying. The vast majority of Jews are going to fall off the face of the map. You're right. 90%. I agree. So what? Doesn't mean we're not chosen. We have to work hard. We have to be better. That's true. So we're made a light into nations. We're supposed to learn. We're supposed to do acts of loving kindness. We'll do all these things. Right? Oh, shouldn't we teach the Noahide laws? Go watch my other videos. Not even going into it. Not wasting my time. There's no mitzvah for Jews to teach non-Jews, period, unless they come to you. Go look at all my proofs. Go watch Tanakh talk. You don't like it? Too bad. That's my answer. There's no myth. Show me a verse in the Torah. Show me where it says it. So you're going to tell me we're a light into nations? That's our job. Really? You got a source? We're a light into nations. Is that what it means? That's what you think it means. That's what you think other people may think it means. And what if I sit and learn all my life? And I don't teach anybody. And I just sit and learn and become someone that's very righteous. And I don't teach anybody. God gonna have claims against me? Maybe. Maybe he said you could have been out there teaching the masses. Maybe. But don't we believe? Don't we believe the mission Pirkei Avos? First mission that says, what does the world stand on? Torah. Torah, avoda, gimul, chesed. Right? Avoda, service to God, i.e. sacrifices. Right? Chesed, acts of loving kindness, and Torah. So what does the vast majority of Jews sat and learned? They didn't teach. They sat and learned. Because if we would do what we're supposed to do, 100%, then non-Jews would fall in line. But we're not. Now, you want to tell me that you don't have a source, because you couldn't bring me a source if you wanted to. But you have no source to tell me. That's my obligation. So you're going to say, how are the non-Jews going to learn about the Noahide laws? They'll find out. They'll search. Because the Talmud says clear, which you don't know, which I'll tell you now. And the Talmud says clear. You want to go in the right direction? God will help you. Jews or non-Jews. You want to go in the wrong direction? Okay, it's your choice. That's your choice. But now, to spin it, say that's my obligation, and that's why the Jews suffer and all that, come on. Source it. I love people who talk a big game and they don't know the source or any source. So if you're going to source it, source it. If you're not going to source it, don't bother. Yeah, let me see any other questions. Someone asked, would it be fair to say anytime we're in spiritual pain that we're going towards false gods? Interesting question. We say every day there's an obligation. Jews have an obligation to be, to serve God with great joy. That's our obligation. That's our obligation. We got to work hard. Now you're going to say, well, the holidays came, they went. It's hard. You get the festival, Shabbos, in between days. It's a lot of eating and whatever. We're supposed to be happy. Are we always happy every second of every day? I don't think so. A great rabbi also happens to be a psychologist. Told me, person go through 75 mood swings. An hour. Not a day, an hour. So we have to work hard. If we're really in tune, like Victor Miller's, we mentioned him before. Victor Miller had no worries. Nothing bothered him. Because he believed everything was, comes from God and everything is good. He had no worries. That's how he lived. Most people today cannot live that. It's too hard. We worry too much. God's in the background pulling the strings. We worry too much. Because essentially, God's going to take care of our needs anyway. Whether it comes out better or worse or whatever. A lot of times we worry, there's nothing to worry about. There's really nothing to worry about. I've had this a number of times. It's like a wink. God gives you a wink. He says, you worried about this and that? What are you worried about? You think I'm still not here? Like, where's your faith? You're right. We're tested a lot. I will say like this. Anything that we do that does not go according to Torah mitzvahs takes us away from God. Takes us, let's say, 4 steps backwards. Now imagine if we did 100 sins a day. Let's say. And let's say maybe there's no proper repentance or whatever. Right? 100 sins a day. Person did 100 sins a day. In other words, you started at minus 100. That means the next day I have to get to a positive 100 to get to 0. Right? So 100, let's say it's 2, let's say 10. Right? So 7 days a week, that's 70. 70 times 4 is 280. 280 times 12 right? That's 280. That's another 56. So you're talking about let's say 330, give or take. That means you've done 330 transgressions a year. I mean, how have it would be that low, right? Okay, so you're at a deficit of minus 336. How easy is it going to be to get to zero? If you properly repent, very good. But you see, the problem is we do a lot of things. You know, we do a lot of things that we say in the Shema. You're not allowed to go after your heart or after your eyes, right? You know, a man or a woman not allowed to go after your heart or after your eyes. If you do that, your mind starts thinking certain things or whatever, which are forbidden, then we're in trouble. So does that mean it's a false God? Doesn't necessarily mean it's a false God. It's something that's leading you astray from Torah. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a false God. It could be just, it could be bad thoughts. It could be, evil inclination. Doesn't mean, it's a false God. I mean, there are, I would say, false gods out there where you're not bowing down to. You're talking about money, fame, power, entertainment, sports. These are false gods. You're not worshiping them like we, maybe some people do. Right? But if anything takes away from Torah mitzvahs, right? That can make us spiritually depressed. And then we're just going through the motions, which hopefully, if a person did what they were supposed to do, during this time, the 30 days of introspection and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and and all that, and they worked really hard. They come into the everyday now. Now you got to put it in action. It's a lot harder, right? It's a lot more difficult. Someone asked genetic defects divine punishment only for the soul, not for the person. If a child is born mentally challenged, or whatever the case is, then it can't be the child that's punished. It's the soul that gets punished for whatever it did in a previous life. How do I know? Because child is not liable for punishment. Person's liable for punishment at the age of bar bat mitzvah, 12 in a day or 13 in a day, right? Or till the age of 20. So a child is not liable. If a child is not liable for punishment, and again, if a child would, break someone's window by accident or whatever, the parent should pay. But really, the child's exempt. Child's exempt. Why? Underage. They're underage. If they're underage, then okay. Parents definitely should pay for the sake of peace, but child really going to be exempt. Right? So it's a punishment for the soul, and the soul can come back in a messed up body just for that, in order that it gets fixed up by being in a messed up body for a number of things. Someone asked, when will 10 men from the nations take hold of clothes of a Jew to learn? It's already happening now. There are non-Jews coming out of the woodworks that want to learn. Right? We are in the Messianic era. But you have to understand, when all said and done, and we just read in Ezekiel chapter 38, 39, or Jeremiah 38, 39, I forget, where it speaks about Gog and Magog, and the war of Gog and Magog, the end of days. So if non-Jews survive, whoever the non-Jews are that will survive, right? It's not going to be at that time they're going to want to learn Torah. It's going to be before that. It's going to be before that. Now, I think we're seeing a phenomenon we haven't seen. That get all these non-Jews, even if they don't want to convert, want to be Noahites. They're coming out of the woodworks, coming out of Christianity, other religions. So, that's part of the, it's part of the prophecy also. That we see, but they're not going to convert. They're talking about people not going to convert. So I think we're already seeing that now. Is it completion? No. Because you have to remember, if they somehow survive and they say, oh, I want to be part of the Jewish people now, they can't convert. Right? Just like in the time of King Solomon and David, they can't convert. Totally can't convert. Right? They weren't allowed to because they saw open miracles. Same thing over here. Right? They'll see open miracles even if they do survive, which I don't think many non-Jews are going to survive, because they're not holding by the Noahide laws, not doing what they should do. But being that as it may, whoever does survive, they go, oh, now I want to do it. They're going to be doing God's will anyway. They just won't be able to convert. So I think that's I think that's part of where we're holding now. I don't think it's we're 100% there, but we're definitely close. I don't think that's the question. And that was the Marv and Betai Shema helps us ask for forgiveness. Yeah. Problem is, I asked the rabbi this once. I asked the great rabbi this question. If we say before we go to sleep, we ask everyone for forgiveness and we grant forgiveness. So why do we have to ask forgiveness before Yom Kippur? So when Rabbi answered me, he said, yeah. He said, Halavai, you meant it. So even though you said it, did you really mean it? If you really meant it, good. Most people probably don't mean it. They say it, but it doesn't necessarily mean 100% they totally forgive. That's probably what I would say. Someone asked, can a goy who's seriously studying for conversion say a blessing and listen to Torah? Yes. 100%. They can make blessings. They can keep Shabbos. They have to do something on purpose, desecrate Shabbos. But they are certainly allowed to, to learn Torah, to wear a yarmulke, to wear a kippah, have their head covered, etc. Not a problem. Someone asked, is it okay to patronize a business operated by idolaters? Yeah, that's not a problem unless it's really idolatry. If it's really idolatry, then that's a problem. In other words, if they're making money from idolatry. If they're just, wayward non-Jews, different issue. Then, we're stuck living amongst the nations. So you do business with them. Even if they're Christians or whatever, doesn't matter. You're allowed to do business with them. Am I allowed to get benefit from their, if they're doing business with idols or any type of idolatry? No, that's the difference. That I'm not allowed to do. Someone asked, is it a sin to drive over the speed limit? You have to live according to the letter of the law, to the land of the law. You have to live according to the law of the land. Set it backwards. So, I mean, whatever the speed limit is, if police say if you go 5 miles per hour over, you're okay. 10 to 15 miles per hour, yeah, it'll be a problem. You could be considered reckless. There are reasons there are speed limits. Right now, if you ever been in a religious neighborhood before Shabbos, before sundown, and you see people driving like maniacs because it's about to be sundown, yeah, no one says that's permissible and it's a danger. It's reckless. 100% it's reckless. I mean, there are laws that there's a reason. There's a reason there's speed limit laws. And a person has to realize also it's part of the law of the land. And there's an obligation to listen to the law of the land. Now, again, if you drive 5 miles over the speed limit, probably not the end of the world. Right? If you're driving, 10, 15 miles over the speed limit, in a school zone, that might be a bigger issue. Might be a bigger moral issue because there are kids around. Something like that. But yeah, a person should stay within, certain speed limits. Otherwise, it's dangerous. Dangerous situation. Someone asked, interesting. Someone wants to know that some people take many years to come out of Christianity. It took them a few months. Is that normal? Depends how much a person was in it. Depends how much a person is willing to look at information. You got plenty of Christians out there refuse to look at information. I mean, they're ignorant as they go. So you're gonna say no, but I can really disprove it. They're not interested. Why should they look at that information? If someone's really looking for the truth, doesn't matter how long if they've been in it even for a short time. There are people who say, "What? You think church lied to me for 30 years?" Yeah, that is the answer. 100%. It's not. I wouldn't say it's so normal, but if someone's really searching for the truth, they'll get to it. They'll get to it even in a short amount of time. But other people refuse. They'll just stay stupid and ignorant because they're not interested in looking further. They're gonna say, "What? You think I'm wrong? You think all the priests are wrong? You think the church is wrong for all these years?" Yeah, that's the answer. They have been, and they keep people ignorant for that reason. A Christian secondhand store supports a rehab. Again, you have to see where the money comes from. If the money they're selling idols and other things, that's really idolatry, or other things used in the practice of idolatry, that's forbidden. If it's just Christians that are doing it, I don't necessarily know it's forbidden. Probably better charities to give to. I would say that. But I wouldn't say it's forbidden per se. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they're idolaters or not. Right? Even if they are idolaters, so what? I can't patronize their business. Why can't I patronize their business? Should be allowed to. Right? I would say there are better charities to give to. That's what I would say. Is lashon hara permuted in therapy? Yeah. And again, the therapist obviously has to discern what information he's taking and whatever, but for that purpose, lashon hara is permitted, what we call for a toelis, for a benefit, but there are certain conditions that have to be met. But in therapy in general, I would say it's permitted. Any other questions? Let me see. Let me see. Is it a manifestation of the evil inclination not properly teach Noahide laws to Gentiles? No. Why is it the evil inclination? My obligation is to reach out to Jews. Who says I have to reach out to non-Jews? The prophecy is non-Jews will come to Jews. Again, show me proof I have to do that. You're not showing me any proof. That's why I'm not answering your questions. Show me proof. Don't just throw out 1,000 questions. Your questions don't bother me. You just don't bring any proof. The Jews have a religious obligation to denounce Christianity as idolatry. No. Why do we have an obligation? We can make fun of it, do whatever we want with it, call them names if we want to, not a problem. Right? Do I have a religious obligation to call them out? Why do I have a religious obligation to call them out? Does that deny the fact I'm chosen? Doesn't deny anything. Who says I have to do that? I don't have a religious obligation to do that. I can make fun of it. I can make, I have to sit there every single day and say, I denounce Christianity. I denounce Islam. I denounce Hinduism. That's part of my religious obligation. We pray, we say we don't bow down to idols like they do. Right? We say that in one of our prayers, say a number of things. But, in general, do I have to make that declaration 10 times a day? No. 100% don't have to do that. Is idolatrous Christianity cursed? I don't know. Why would I say it's cursed? They got millions and millions of followers that are ignorant. Are they cursed? They're going to get destroyed. Edom's going to get destroyed. That's what the prophets say. False prophets, false religions, they're going to get destroyed if they follow them. Part of the Noahide laws. What's the difference between Christianity and anybody else? What's the difference between a Christian and a Hindu? Not very much. You're going to say they're worse? Who knows? I'm not going to grade them. Waste of time. Right? Total waste of time. I would say, they're going to get destroyed. 100%. They're still alive and well. So it's going to happen at the end of days, whenever it's going to happen. But all false religions, even yours, even Islam, even all these false religions, 79,999, they're all going to get destroyed except for us. And only the Jews that keep Torah mitzvahs is going to survive. Rankings don't matter. Totally don't matter. Not going to do anything. Any other questions? Jews are supposed to do what we're supposed to do. I agree. I 100%. I agree. We're supposed to do what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to lead. We're supposed to be, we're supposed to be the chosen people. And if we would really do what we're supposed to do, non-Jews would fall in line. They would. It's okay. So even if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, that doesn't necessarily mean, stop what I'm doing, teach non-Jews unless they come to me. That's not my obligation. And again, show me proof. Show me proof. I want to see proof. You don't have any proof. Okay, they're just questions. Any other questions? Laura points out, I heard that there's a source someday in the way to redemption, everyone on earth will become Jewish. That's not true. I mean, I've never heard such a thing. I don't believe that to be true because God created Jews and non-Jews different. If we're different, even at that time, we're going to be different also. Someone asked, we have to be around Christians to put ourselves out there to show them. Again, why? We're stuck living in a non-Jewish world, right? We do business with non-Jews. We're stuck. So who says, I have to go out of my way to help support them and their charities, even if it's not for idolatry? Who says I have to do that? Right? It's to support Jewish causes because I'm Jewish. Support Jewish causes, not non-Jewish causes. But again, if someone wanted to support a Christian cause, and it's not idolatry, they could. I'm not saying they can't. 100% they could. Bottom line is that if it's not idolatry, it's not a problem. It's just, I would think there are better ways to give money. That's what I would think. The boy 36 capital offenses his life and next become a Muslim. Great. We're gonna take all these non-Jews and going to be Muslims. Beautiful idea. Absolutely no comment on that. Yeah. Any other questions? I'll throw one thing out there. Herzl's big idea. Theodor Herzl. His big idea, you can read about it, right? Number of places he wrote it. His big idea to say Judaism was to convert to Christianity. Oh, you can't go. That's blasphemous. That's idolatry. That's this. Better be a Muslim. Who says? Just because they believe in one God, that means they're de facto Noahide? I disagree. And I'll tell you I disagree. And all I have to do is find one case. One case where Sharia law does not conform with the Noahide laws. And that's it. Muslims are out. All I need is one. Right? But I wouldn't even waste my time doing that because I believe it's false. It's a false religion. And that's it. So you want all the non-Jews to be de facto Muslims? Great. They're going to die anyway. They're not going to be keeping the Noahide laws. Right? I'm pretty convinced they're not going to be keeping the Noahide laws. Maybe when I give this class in 2 weeks about the Noahide laws, they're going to go soup to nuts. You're going to see. Because whatever Sharia law you're going to see what things won't apply. And then you're not going to ask this question again. Any other questions? All right. On that note, I'm going to sign out. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me. I can't say on Facebook. You can send me on Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. Send me a note there because whatever, working on my profile, second profile, whatever. That's why I'm doing this on YouTube. Or you can send me an email, Rabbi Chaim Coffman @gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Whichever good, beginning of the day, end of the day, or middle of the day, depending where you are.